guys, I'm Eliza Wood, this is my channel, and let's talk about history bounding. Whee! So, if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that I prefer to use historical patterns over modern patterns if at all possible, and I prefer to draft rather than using the pre-made fashion patterns. I just haven't been able to wrap my head around pre-made fashion patterns, and while I'm struggling to wrap my hand around drafting them myself too, I don't know why, I just feel like it fits me better. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm doing it right, but I'll struggle through anyway because that's just how I prefer to do it. So I have particularly been trying to improve my wardrobe with several different history bounding projects, just things that I actually want to wear instead of the modern fast fashion that I wear because I have to. But eventually I would like to have all of the history bounding all over my closet and not have anything that was bought from a store. Now, I really actually don't know if what I like particularly is history bounding. Like, I consider it history bounding because I'm using historical patterns to make the projects, but honestly, I'm most inspired by villainous manga and manhwa because just looking at the dresses that these people design, especially for my favorite two fashion-wise, is I Became the Ugly Lady and When the Villainess Loves. I love looking at those dresses and have definitely been wanting a lot of them a lot of the time. In a previous video, I've even made one of the maid dresses from I Became the Ugly Lady, and I have been wanting to make several others. So history bounding and villainous dramas is what I'm inspired by right now in order to make an outfit. And what better excuse to make an outfit than a Christmas party? Now, for the past few years, I have also been trying to do a new Christmas project for every December. I've never posted one because I just never finished on the time or what, and I was still kind of starting out when I first started doing this. But this year I decided I'm gonna post my Christmas project, especially since I wanted to have my Christmas project done in time to do a Christmas party that I was going to on December 5th. Yes, I know I'm posting this like December 20 something, but I swear I did finish this before that. I just haven't gotten around to filming the outro and all that stuff. But for this project, I was really inspired by a specific fabric. I was traveling through Joann's and I found this fabric. You can't really see it all that well in the video on the camera. All you really see is the sparkles, but this is a polyester velvet and it's a stretch fabric as well. So it looks like velvet, but it has a stretch and it's very light. So it doesn't have the weight of the velvet, but it has a little bit of the luxurious look of velvet. Again, it's not quite as nice as real velvet, and it's obviously not real velvet. But there's also a hatchwork of sparkly lines along the velvet, and it just like, it screamed Christmas to me, and it had to be a Christmas project. So that's what I decided to do, was make a Christmas dress out of that. And while I was there, I was looking for anything else that would go with this particular fabric, and I found this fabric, and it's hard to see. There you go. I found this fabric right here. It's really just a cotton, what did they call it? I can't remember what they called it. If I remember before posting this, I'll put it in the here. If not, then hopefully I'll be able to find it eventually and put it in the summary. But this is really just an off-white cotton, kind of looks a bit yellowy, so I was thinking it got the feeling of gold. And I remember that I have some gold lace at home that I thought would be perfect for this project. Of course, at this point, I haven't designed anything yet. All I know is I want to do history bounding, I want to do a Christmas dress with that velvet and I want to accent it with this cotton. Then I get home and I remember that I have another green fabric at my house, which is this fabric, which is a green suede fabric. So I thought, okay, here's the design. Now I can't draw that well, so unfortunately you're just gonna have to visualize the feeling. But I'm thinking of having shorts made of the green, this green color. I'm having shorts made of this, and then having a blouse, kind of like a Gibson blouse, made out of the cotton fabric, and some bloomers also made out of the cotton fabric that will just barely peek through the shorts. And then I will have an overdress that is just the velvet with the gold lace trim. Now I'm not really sure exactly what patterns I'm gonna use for any of this stuff at this point, except for the Gibson blouse. So I'm actually gonna start by drafting the Gibson blouse using a Parisian tailoring book that I found. And that, along with any of my other references, will be linked down below. So let's get started on drafting the Gibson blouse. First, we gotta take measurements. Now, the measurements for this particular project, there were quite a few. There was like 20-something measurements that I had to take and write them all down. However, one thing I really liked about this particular drafting method is that once you have all of your measurements, you actually make a tape measure based on your own height and width of certain parts of your body. So you're not trying to use common measurements that work for everybody on your projects when they don't actually work for everybody. They work for the most part, but there's always something that's wrong. And whenever I'm trying to scale up or down a project, I'm always using proportional math, and that's no fun. So, I think I'm getting better at getting some angles so you can actually see what I'm doing, but then once I've drawn the whole pattern, this drafting method also has how everything should measure, like where you should compare your measurements to the pattern to make sure everything fits correctly. Unfortunately, there are some places where it's kind of iffy whether or not I got the right spot, and some measurements that you really should have somebody else take for you, but I live alone, so I took whatever measurements I could and just kind of guesstimated to try to get the closest I could. And then I made a mock-up, which I did not film because I was like, I'll have plenty of film for this YouTube video. It's not necessary, and I don't have enough time to set up the camera. So I just finished my one and only mock-up. I did not take any pictures because I was just gonna real quickly do it. I'm hoping to get quickly to the actual fabric, which is why I'm only doing one mock-up. Surprisingly, the only adjustment that I needed was, unsurprisingly, the bust. I needed to add a little bit to the front bust, and then I needed to take away a little bit around the neckline. And I also needed to take away a little bit of the front length. So I wound up cutting a line from about the bust line down to the dart and taking it away via that dart, which makes the dart at the bottom bigger, which is more common. I was very surprised when my pattern had such a small dart, but it was real minor adjustments. I also needed to take away a little bit of the neckline because it was too close to the neck, so it was wrinkling on the shoulders. Now, with all of those adjustments, I did it on the fabric on the first mock-up, and it fit for the most part. There was still some wrinkling that if I fiddled with it a bit more, I could probably fix. But for the sake of this project and my time limit, I think it's good enough for me to go ahead and move on to the fabric. And all of my fabric for the top is either stretchy or will be loose fitting anyway, so I'm totally okay with it being the wrong size. Like if it's a little too small, that's fine, because the stretchiness of the fabric will take that into account. So I'm going to use that pattern for the shirt and the coat. I'm hoping, or the overdress, I'm hoping that I can use the same fabric. It looked to be about the same pattern. I'm gonna have to change it a little bit, but I still have the mock-up that I can cut up, because I have to change the waist of the overdress, or the waistline of the overdress, because the overdress is a Regency dress which had an empire waistline, and an empire waistline is pretty much an underbust waistline. So I'm gonna need to adjust that. But since I have a base pattern, I shouldn't have to do any mock-ups. I can just move on to the actual dress. At least that's the plan. So I still need to draft the pants, but I think I'm gonna do the shirt and overdress first, just to get those out of the way. And then I can work on the pants once those are done, especially the overdress, because the overdress is the most important part. That's what's really making it the Christmas dress. And I could probably wear the overdress with something else if I don't finish everything else. I'm getting ready for work right now, so I can't exactly work on it at the moment. But when I get home today, I will be cutting out actual fabric. Woo! And it was at this point that I realized that that's the only film I have. Apparently everything else that I filmed for this particular video has disappeared into the ether at some point. So the rest of it is just gonna be me talking and trying my best to show you what I did and explaining it as best as I can. But while we're on drafting, I will also talk about the shorts that I drafted. Now this one I drafted based on a specific YouTube video, which I will link down below, of course, where I just followed their tutorials exactly. I didn't want to try to figure that out, and there are no historical patterns, at least for women, for pants, and honestly, I'm not super fond of the men's pants in historical patterns, so Baron, do you need to be up there? Once I have both the Parisian tailored shirt as well as the pants drafted patterns, I can use these as my base patterns. From this, I will actually make every other pattern, starting with the Gibson shirt. For the Gibson shirt, all I really did to alter the original pattern is I took away the darts, and I also took away any curve that was in any of the seams between the pattern pieces. Probably the biggest alteration I made was to connect the center back piece with the side back piece, which has, the side back piece has kind of this shape, and then the center back piece also has that shape, which is hard to do with my hands. But what happened was there was this kind of V shape there where they didn't attach, because it's supposed to be a curved line, and that's what makes it hit straight against your back. So that's pretty much the dart in the back. I just put, as long as the armhole was attached, then I just filled in the dart at the bottom, and again, that was just a full line. I wanted it to be pretty loose at the bottom, because the way the Gibson shirts work, my understanding, is that you would tie them at the waist, and then they would be kind of loose flowing around the bust and stomach area. I did not decide to tie mine because I had every intention of making the shorts be pretty high up on my waist. So the shorts were gonna go over the top of the shirt, and the shirt was just kind of gonna be loose around the waistband of the shorts. The other alteration I made was to have a line from about here all the way to the front, and same in the back. This was going to be my yoke, which I believe the Gibson girl shirts, generally the yoke is made out of lace, but I actually owned some fabric that I thought would be perfect. I used it all up, so I'll show you it on the actual finished product. I owned this kind of fabric that I thought would look really nice with the cotton shirt. I also forgot to mention that I drafted a sleeve pattern from the same Parisian tailoring method, which is used on this shirt as well. So first thing to do is cut out all the pieces. Pretty quick, pretty simple. Don't really need that to be filmed. I wish I had it, but you know, it is what it is. And then we're gonna sew it all together. Because this was a quick and dirty project, I did not wind up doing anything with my raw edges. You can see here, this is a raw edge. That means that this particular blouse is not going to survive the washing machine very long. So I probably will eventually finish those seams, maybe by tacking them down with a fell stitch, but for now they're just raw. I think if I were to do this project again, I would probably do a French seam on this blouse, which is where you sew it wrong sides together and then you flip it and you sew it right sides together, which encases that little seam and makes it so that the raw edges are not loose and open. When I was sewing on the yoke, I attached this little lace bit right here, if you can see it, there we go. This lace right here, it's actually two-sided, but I went ahead and just used it, sewed it along the middle so that it would be one-sided, and that's just kind of a separation between the yoke and the cotton fabric, because I just thought that the separation without the lace would just be way too harsh. Then for the sleeves. Now, I did not, when drafting the sleeves, try very hard to make sure that the sleeves would fit within the armhole. That is because I had every intention of gathering the sleeves down into the armhole. So you can see here that the sleeves have a little bit of wrinkling here. That's because I gathered them down into the armhole. That was always the plan. But while I was doing that, I also gathered this lace into the armhole as well. So it's just a nice like flowery lace that I thought would look really nice on the shoulders. And while I was at it, I also gathered the same lace into the neckline of the project. So you can see here I've got it gathered into the neckline. And then the lace unfortunately had a tendency to actually fold over when worn, so it actually looked really bad because it was forcing the raw edges to be visible. So what I wound up doing is I wound up sewing a line, see if you can't see it, a line of stitches. I actually did 2 at the neckline to make sure that the edges of the fabric was tacked down. I only did 1 line at all the other areas except for the sleeves. The sleeves did not get any lines because I just didn't think it would look good to have that tacking line. And then finally I have a button yoke here, which I found a tutorial on how to add a button placket. I have a button placket, which I found a tutorial on how to add a button placket, and I happen to already have these buttons, which I thought worked perfectly for this particular project. And I finally figured out how to use the buttonhole foot on my sewing machine. So I was able to get the buttons to look really nice on this particular project. So there is my Gibson-ish girl blouse. I don't think it's actually exactly a Gibson girl blouse. Some things, I think that I should have made the shirt wider and then gathered it down into the yoke. I believe that's a lot more common for a Gibson girl blouse, and I think it would have looked nicer. I did not do that for this particular project because I thought, well, it's already got that wrinkly texture. If I gather it down, it'll just look too gathered. But I do think it was necessary for that purpose. The other thing I forgot to mention when I was altering this pattern, the Parisian bodice drafted pattern that I had earlier only goes to about the waist. So I did wind up adding a little bit to the bottom of this pattern in order to make sure that it was long enough. Unfortunately, I do not believe that I added enough, and I think I definitely needed to add more in the back. If you look at the pattern, you can see there is a clear difference. I'm holding currently the shoulders of the pattern, and you can see there's a clear difference between the front and the back. The back is a lot shorter than the front, and unfortunately because of that, I cannot wear this shirt without it riding up and showing my skin. Well, actually, I can't wear the shirt without a tank top anyway because it's somewhat see-through, which I was not expecting, but so anytime that I wear this shirt, it always rides up, and the only possible way for me to wear this shirt without it riding up is to have a very high-waisted pair of pants. And finally, I finished it off with using my rolled hem stitch. There you go. Rolled hem stitch to finish off. These are my sleeves, but I did the same thing at the hem of the shirt. Because this is already gathered fabric, the rolled hem wanted to do a straight fabric, so it kind of gave it this nice like ruffly texture and made it a little bit wider at that particular part of the fabric. That was just a happy accident. I was not actually expecting it to do that. Unfortunately, I'm still learning the rolled hem foot, so it does look a little ugly. But otherwise, I am really happy with the shirt. Now, once the shirt is done, I decided to go ahead and work on my bloomers because it's the same fabric. So for the bloomers, I really wanted to do something fancy because I did want them to be visible underneath the shorts. So what I wound up doing is I wound up making, I'm gonna say this wrong, coquette bloomers, which again, link down below of the video that I found to make those. So using my pre-drafted shorts pattern, I cut them short so that there was only about an inch or an inch and a half from the crotch down the leg, because I had every intention of adding lace at the bottom. And then that's the inner thigh, and then at the outer thigh I actually made it shorter than that, so it had kind of this upward motion and then came back down, going back to the inner thigh. Then I took strips of, I believe, 3-inch wide fabric that I could gather down into ruffles that I could decorate the bloomers with. Also, any darts or anything that was in the shorts pattern I immediately removed because, whoa, dude, don't die. Just like with the shirt pattern, I took away any darts on the shorts pattern because I have every intention of having this particular bloomers gathered down with a drawstring. So first things first, we have to attach the bottom row of gathered fabric, the little strip of fabric, as well as I decided to put some ribbon at the top here. We need to gather that down into the leg. Before you sew the legs together or even to themselves, before you do any sewing, you have to add the bottom frills. That way when you sew the legs closed, you're also sewing the frills closed. Unfortunately, even though I checked like 3 or 4 times before attaching the frills, I somehow managed to do 2 of the same direction pants. So what I wound up doing is when I sewed the 2 legs together, I just cut them so that the crotch curve thing was the same on both sides. So pretty much it was 2 backs instead of a front and a back. Unfortunately, what I did not realize is that because of this, the pant legs would hang way too low between my legs, and it was not pretty. So what I wound up doing, and I will eventually wind up fixing this with a sewing machine, is I actually had to attach some safety pins to the crotch to make it smaller so that maybe it wouldn't hang so low and be visible and be ugly. It was just bad. So once now we have the bloomers put together, we can start adding the rest of the frills. So based on the tutorial, I have at this point 2 circles of the ribbon attached to the 3-inch wide fabric strip. that is going to be gathered down to the Coquette Bloomers in kind of the same shape but more drastic that I had drawn the bottom of the Bloomer shorts. And that's what gives this look here. So you have the 3 lace there and there. One of the things that the girl in the YouTube video did is she tacked down all of her ribbons so that they wouldn't be kind of all floofy like that. What happens with mine is if you kind of put pressure on it, it flips up. Which makes sense, and eventually I might tack down these little bits of frill, but I didn't think it was necessary, and again, I didn't want to bother with it. Oh, and before you attach any of the frills, because it will be a pain in the butt, make sure that you finish your hems. So again, I did some rolled hems on these, as well as I did rolled hems on all of my frills. And still, I cannot get that stupid rolled hem to work correctly. I'm learning, it's getting better, but it's still not great. And then finally, I turned my waistband over. Now, one thing I did not do that the Coquette Bloomers did is I didn't add, I believe she had like an 1.5 inches or something waistband that she added on later. I did not add the waistband because I didn't want the bloomers to sit too high on my waist, because I want them to peek under the leg, but I don't want them to be visible over the pants. So what I did instead is I just turned down the top of the bloomers. Let's see, you'll see it better here. I turned down the top of the bloomers and then turned them down again in order to make this little casing that I then hand stitched. I know I'm not supposed to be hand stitching for fast reasons, but I then hand stitched here a little whole grommet thing that I could pull the lace through. And this is the lace that I used on the bodice pattern, the one that I said was 2-sided. So I just used this to also make my drawstring, mainly because I had it and I didn't really have anything else to use, so I was just kind of use up what I had. Next was the pants pattern, which unfortunately was a failure. So I just directly cut out the pattern that was the high-waisted shorts pattern from the video that I took this pattern from. So I just directly cut it out of the shorts pattern. You can't see it. Let's see. I did not put the dart in the front. I only put the darts in the back because I found that the dart in the front made it a little too tight. So when I was doing the mock-up for the shorts, so I didn't put the dart in the front, but I did in the back. The other thing I added on is the pockets. The way that she did her pockets was a round pocket that would be visible, much like your normal pair of jeans, where you can just see the back end of the pocket. I did not want that, so what I wound up doing is creating a pocket pattern that would be something like the historical pocket patterns that would just kind of sit in the seam of the pants, but out enough that it wouldn't get stuck in anything, and it has enough room for my hands, and it's also a stretchy fabric that I was using. I happen to also have this stretchy fabric, which is almost the same color as the shorts. For the pocket, I wound up doing a French seam, if only because when I first did it, I wasn't thinking about it, and I did it the wrong way, and so I flipped it the correct way and re-sewed it. But for the actual pants, I just did a regular seam, and the raw edges are again very visible and probably would not last very long in the washing machine. Then I flipped down the pants. I did not use the rolled hem foot on this simply because I didn't think the rolled hem foot would survive this thick of a fabric. So I wound up just flipping it over about 1/2 inch. I believe it's 1/2 inch. About 1/2 inch, and then flipping it over 1/2 inch again and just sewing that down. It was at this point that I tried the shorts on with everything else. And there was 2 problems with the shorts. One, I just don't think that these pants were doing the shorts any favors. Like, this fabric is super stiff, which is the whole reason I wanted it. I wanted a stiff pair of shorts that would keep their shape. But I just think this was too stiff and it wasn't doing me any favors. And it was really, really badly gathering around the crotch, and it didn't look pretty. I think that might have been because I don't have a waistband on it yet, so I might have been trying to pull it too high on my body, and therefore it was pretty much giving me a wedgie. But the other problem was that the bloomers, they looked horrible with the shorts. I did not consider the fact that only the bottom of the bloomers were actually going to peek through the shorts. And the fact that these shorts have a very straight hem, whereas the bloomers have kind of an angled hem, means that what was happening with the bloomers is you were getting this kind of look, where this is my crotch. So nothing would be on the outside hem. You would see none of the bloomers, but you'd get this weird V shape around my crotch. Did not look good at all. So this guy got scrapped. And instead, what I decided to do was a different modern pattern, because at this point it was the morning of the Christmas party and I was out of time. What I decided to do instead, still using the same fabric, is to make a simple circle skirt. I used the Mood circle skirt calculator, but I did wind up making it a little bit bigger than would be normal for my waist, because I wanted to gather it down so there would be a little bit more volume. So as you can see here, I've got it gathered into my waistband, but it is still a normal circle skirt. And because it's a very short circle skirt, I actually was able to cut it out in one full round. So there is no seams in this circle skirt. Surprisingly, I made it big enough to go over my bust with a bit of a struggle, and I was very much expecting to have to put some sort of gathering into it, some sort of elastic or something, but it turns out that it was able to sit on my hips because it's stiff enough that it wasn't gonna be like wiggling around. So I was able to sit on my hips without being pulled down too much and sit at the perfect length. So I have my favorite thing right now to do a nice stiff hemline, synthetic horse braid, which I do not know where my synthetic horse braid is at the moment. It's just like a strip of plastic mesh that's got this crisscross woven kind of pattern that gives it a stiffer feel to it, and it makes it so that skirts, any skirt, I actually put it on a lot of my skirts, have a wider, like, they don't want to collapse in on themselves as easily. Now this fabric wasn't going to do it anyway because it's so stiff, but I went ahead and put in some of that as well. I wrapped my fabric around the horsehair braid. You can kind of see right here where I just had a little tiny bit that wrapped around the horsehair braid, and then I flipped that up again and sewed that down. So that way my horsehair braid was staying in place and I didn't have any raw edges on the skirt. Then I took a 3-inch wide strip of the same fabric and I sewed it onto the front and then flipped it over the waistband and attached it to the back. Now at this point I was even running out of thread. You can see here that I was using maybe the different color thread. I was actually using the thread that was supposed to be for the velvet because I was like, I really have to finish this. One mistake that I did make, I feel, is that I did not gather the skirt evenly. It got to the point that I was gonna be late for work if I didn't finish this and get ready to go to the party. So I wound up just kind of willy-nilly gathering it, and I decided that what would be best if I wanted it to have more volume in the back than in the front was to have a spot in the front that had no gathering whatsoever. And I think it would have worked just fine, but you can see this is my spot that has no gathering, and then there's a lot of gathering on this side and like no gathering on that side. So it didn't quite work out the way I had hoped. And at this point, you're wondering, what about that velvet fabric? I didn't get it done in time. So that's gonna have to be in another video. But with all of that, let's go to the one other thing that I have filmed, which is the outro, to talk about the pros and cons and all that stuff of this particular Christmas party dress. Yes, I know I'm wearing the same outfit as I did in the last video, but it goes together, so that's why I did it. Now you'll have glimpsed a minute ago the actual bloomers. I do like them, however, I honestly don't know in what instance I could wear them and have them be visible. So right now I wear them in such a way that they kind of peek through every now and again when I'm wearing this skirt, but it's only ever in this front area. So it's like keeping, it's drawing attention straight to my crotch because the sides are coming up like that. So if you want your bloomers to be visible, like you're purposely making them to be visible, your outfit either has to come up at the sides as well, or you have to make a different type of bloomer. The coquette bloomers are not meant for this purpose. Now, as for the blouse, it is actually my favorite part because I think it's the only thing that went originally to plan. I'm really happy with it. The only problem I have with it is the back here. You can see it's really short. Like, I keep having to pull it down just to hope that it'll cover my back. The other problem is that whenever I wear it without something over it, like this pair of stays, it's see-through, so you can see through it to my skin. So this is a history-bounding outfit, but if I wanted to cover up the fact that the shirt is see-through, I have to wear either something over the top of it or something underneath it. Now these stays, I should also mention, I made previously. I threw them on because they went with the outfit. But if you're curious on how I made the stays, you can watch my last video for the Seder stays. But that's neither here nor there. Gotta get back to the Christmas outfit. Because I did do this outfit in a little bit of a hurry, there are some issues. Like, I keep finding random strings, like this whole sleeve has random strings that I haven't cut off yet, and the edges just look atrocious. I'm still trying to figure out my rounded hem foot, and I've just never been able to do it well. But I love the little lace details I've got going on. There's also some on the shoulders, which you can't see because of the Seder corset. There we go. And there's a little bit of lace right here just to separate the two different kinds. I feared for a little bit that these two different fabrics would not go well together, but luckily they did actually go pretty well together, so that was a concern that was unnecessary. Whew! Now I'm still gonna try to finish the Christmas dress. I hope to put it in the next video because my new deadline for the Christmas dress is actually Christmas, but unfortunately, because the deadline is Christmas, I won't be able to post it until after Christmas. But since I did have a Christmas party dress all ready to go, I thought I would show it off to you guys now and wish you a Merry Christmas. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them down below. And if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see the Christmas dress finished, go ahead and subscribe. I will hopefully be posting that pretty soon. Bye!